We did a video on this fight back in April of 2021, a full set ago, getting set for Josiane Nunes taking on Infinity Zarah Fairn. And Matt, this is again a very interesting fight. Now, that original fight was supposed to be at bantamweight. This one's now at featherweight, a division dominated by a champion and about three other fighters that aren't Norma Dumont and Danielle Wolf. And in this one, it gets very, very interesting when you look into their camps. Astra fight team for Josiane Nunes, and for Zarah Fairn, she repped a boxing gym out of France for the longest time. But getting set for this fight and for the last, half a year, seems like from her Instagram, she's been training at Team Academia Figueiredo. So a really interesting move, just a life choice there from Zarah Fairn. But we're going to throw it back to that video because you know what? Most people, they might not even remember that set. So let's throw it on back to the original video for Nunes versus Fairn. Taking on France's Zarah Fairn. And while some people might be familiar with Fairn, she came into the UFC with a little bit of fanfare. She was France's first woman in the UFC. And since then, all the fanfare is gone and she's dropped down a weight class. Listen, she lost her debut to Megan Anderson in the big house. It was Marvel Stadium. She got finished in the first round. So she goes out there last year and she fights Canada's Felicia Spencer. And the Canadian was able to withstand the early storm. They struck, they traded. Fairn had a little bit of success. And then Felicia Spencer went, well, you have no ground game. I'm taking you down. I'm going to get in mount. I'm going to hammer away at your face. And for Fairn, she didn't really have much of an answer. But Felicia Spencer, very heavy on top, landed some good elbows too. Referee saw enough. For Zarah Fairn, she's a primary boxer, and she is a little bit heavy on her tippy toes. Like, she weighs heavy ahead. She moves ahead quite well. She will throw in combination. But she leaves a lot of weight on her front foot, and listen, she doesn't throw much for kicks. She doesn't really have much of a clinch game from what we've seen in the UFC, but we did see it on the regional scene that her clinch game could be effective. She can use her cardio as a weapon, which I worry about a little bit because she's 34 right now in this bantamweight division. But if Holly Holm can still do it, then hey, who knows what's going to happen. Like I said, she's taking on Brazil's Josiane Nunes.
Zarah Fairn, we've seen her in her two UFC fights. They have not gone her way. And the holes that we did see exposed, it was in the grappling. And now, I don't think Josiane Nunes is going to go out shooting double legs or wearing a wrestling shoes to this fight. So stylistically, I do think entertainment-wise, at least, we should get a very fun fight here. For me, I do think you can somewhat simplify this fight into, can Josiane Nunes get on the inside of Zarah Fairn? And I don't want to say that's easier said than done, because I do think you can get on the inside of someone like Fairn. And the reason I say that is because we've seen fighters, they can close the distance on her. Yes, they've used that distance management, I guess, for takedown attempts, but if you get on the inside, you can work her body into the head. And the interesting thing about Nunes, and you kind of brought it up, stylistically and at least physically, she is built a lot like Jessica Andrade when Andrade used to fight at 135. Stylistically might not be as similar, whereas Andrade, she gets a little bit more wild with her techniques. She'll throw hard to the body, hard to the head, whereas Nunes can keep things a lot more technical. For me, if Nunes can stick with low leg kicks and throw overhands to make Fairn pay for her single shots, I really do think she can replicate a somewhat successful gameplay.
So in the time that we switched since we switched studios, Nunes is 2-0 in the UFC. She beat Ramona Pascual, dropped her a couple of times. She fought Bia Malecki. Well, she knocked her out. So for Nunes, she's been absolutely lighting the world on fire, and she's actually a ranked fighter in the bantamweight division, even though fights have been all over the place for her. And for Zarah Fairn, again, she's lost 2 fights by finish in the UFC, and we haven't really been able to see the boxing and the Thai style that she was able to employ on the regional scene before coming into the UFC. You're going to find it weird that I have their weigh-ins from their last fights on the graphic. 145.5 for Nunes, her last time out against Pascual. That one she moved up in weight to take. And for Fairn, I've got it at 147. Why do I have it at 147? Why would I do that? Because in their original fight, back in 2021, Fairn weighed 147 for a fight at bantamweight, so they decided to scrap the fight. So Zarah Fairn, first fight, first time she's weighed in since 2021, Matt. I have no friggin' clue what she's going to look like in this one.
This is one of those fights where it's like, hey, you both kind of have limited opponents. We want to keep the division alive. Do you want to fight at 145? And that's basically the selling point. Josiane Nunes is, the fighter that I describe when I talk about Priscilla Cachoeira, that's who Josiane really is. She has that kind of next level power. It's like, you know the song Warning by Biggie? There'd be a lot of slow singing and flower bringing if my burglar alarm starts ringing. That's Josiane Nunes. Like, you do not want to mess with this lady. There's a handful of fighters that would just make me jump out of the cage if I saw them across me. It's just for Nunes, she's one of a handful of female fighters that you can almost predict a finish is going to come from her fights. And you can't say that a lot of times. I remember we talked at length about how Ketlin versus Raquel Pennington, you know what the result's probably going to be? A controversial split decision. You know what the result was? A controversial split decision. Wasn't a great fight. Neither fighter really had an argument to win that one. But for Nunes, she goes in there to throw hammers. And yes, it does leave her open to a really talented counter striker. Those windows are going to be there if she ever fights Amanda Nunes. Because really, if you're fighting at 145, that's all that you're building your career towards. I just think for Nunes, she's shown the ability to go out there and get finishes at the UFC level. And unfortunately for Fairn, like you said, it hasn't been the best of runs as of late. And it is surprising to see a fighter coming off two pretty bad losses, if we're being honest, go up against someone who has looked like such a sledgehammer so far in their UFC tenure.
Well, and that's the tricky part about it. Fairn lost by finish to Megan Anderson, who challenged for the title. Fairn lost to Felicia Spencer, who challenged for the title. I don't know what Zarah Fairn's going to look like, so I would stay away from this. This is definitely a pop and popcorn fight from that respect. Nunes is a pretty big favorite. We have a look at the odds here on Topology. The votes are surprised to us as they are to you, Matt. I'm going to say over under 90% Nunes.
I'll say over.
My over-unders haven't been great. This one, okay, we're a little bit closer. 860 total votes, 95% Nunes, 70% by knockout for the 5% that have Fairn, 59% by decision. We'll have a look at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram. 79% going with Nunes. So a lot of people going with Nunes in this one. Again, I just wonder, you got Fairn kind of moving her life for the last half a year, last 6 months, going to Academia Team Figueiredo. She has that big 6-inch height, 5-inch reach advantage over Nunes. Nunes is great at crashing distance. She paused those overhands, kind of like an old-style Chuck Liddell from the southpaw stance, but it leaves her wide open to get countered. And again, when you look at it for Fairn, it's the knees and it's the boxing combinations. That's a winning way to beat somebody like Nunes. It's just, I haven't seen it from Fairn. It's been a long time, and I got to go with the recency out of it and pick Nunes.
It just feels like for Fairn, it takes her a little while to find her own rhythm before she can have success, and Nunes is a difficult fighter to find your rhythm against. She's crashing forward, always making you think about the big shots, so I agree with you. I've also got Nunes.
Tough to have a lot of confidence just based off the recency, though. Both of us going with Josiane Nunes to get the win. Matt, a couple of Brazilian finishers in the main event, co-main event, fighting for titles. Deiveson Figueiredo, Brandon Moreno, Glover Teixeira taking on Jamal Hill. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.